All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another episode of Reactionary Opinions, the most based and reactionary show on the African continent. Wow, we have a particularly good episode for you folks this evening. A guest that has made quite a few appearances on the various truth community channels out there, and this guy actually made an impression on us because it's a fresh look at the whole thing that they are campaigning about. It's essentially, Cape Independence. It is whether the idea of Cape Independence is anything good to go by, and so on. But before we get into our guest, his name is Phil Craig. He represents the Cape Independence Advocacy Group. And before we get into that, I want to just play you guys a video, which is what was produced by the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, and then we'll jump right into the video. Let me just bring this up here quickly. Sorry, there we go. Share it with everyone there. Okay. Sorry, I'm not very good at this, so bear with me on this, folks. Give me a couple of minutes.
Having a boomer moment.
Yeah, man, total boomer moment. Okay.
Consent of the people is the cornerstone of democracy. 71% of Cape voters do not want the ANC to govern them. Never in the history of South Africa have the people of the Cape ever given their consent to be governed by the ANC. Since 1994, the ANC has averaged only 36% of the Cape vote. Over the last decade, that average has fallen to 31%. In 2019, despite Ramaphosa, it dropped to an all-time low of 29%. Our government was not chosen by our people. It was chosen despite them.
I'm so used to mediocrity. I don't expect much from the government anyway. I mean, why are we still struggling with such extreme inequality, unemployment, and poor education? And not to mention the high levels of crime and gender-based violence.
I do not have the government which I want, as our current government is filled with corruption, incompetence, double standards when it comes to racism, and our country faces a huge unemployment and inequality challenge.
Definitely not. They're incompetent and corrupt, they're obsessed by race, and they're pursuing policies that are doomed to failure. You only have to look at how many people are unemployed and the state of our economy.
I do sometimes wish I can leave, but I can't really afford to, and why should I have to? I do worry about a future for my children. I'm constantly worried about crime, and to be honest, I feel marginalized. Am I even still welcome here?
Every day I consider leaving the country of my birth, as so many of our problems are faced by so many South Africans across the divide. Poor South Africans, particularly those who are black, do not have the means to really be empowered and truly be empowered.
I think everyone has a name. Look, I love South Africa, and I really don't want to leave. But I do ask myself, what future do my children really have if I stay here?
Is that even possible? Well, it's going to mean that corruption, crime, and poverty are finally going to be properly addressed, and that we start building an inclusive community where everyone is welcome. And why not?
I have considered it with Cape to South Africa. I just have never thought that it is really possible or likely. Also, there seems to not be that much support from what I understand. But I really hope that actually are many closet Cape secessionist supporters out there.
Definitely. I'm all for it. The Cape is different to South Africa. We just want different things. I want a future for my children, and I think if we're going to have that, we have to go it alone.
Our national government was chosen for us, not by us. As the people of the Cape, we do not want this government. The brutal truth, however, is that we did give our consent. We gave it by allowing the rest of South Africa to choose on our behalf. We continue to give it by staying in a voluntary relationship with South Africa. Many would say it has become an abusive relationship, but we don't have to stay. The democratic will of the peoples of the Cape can only ever truly be expressed when we choose our own government. Visit www.capeindependence.org to find out more.
Very, very, very cool. Sorry, I saw in the comments section over here that there was a bit of an echo on that. Apologies for that. Like Dylan said,
hey everybody, it's Big Daddy Liberty here, your favorite.
As
see Clay's joining us.
He just signed in. but as Dylan said, I am having a bit of a boomer moment, and yeah. Anyway, so let's jump right into it. Welcome, Phil. Good to have you here. How's it going?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Welcome to you guys and everybody that's listening. Fantastic.
So, Phil, I think we're you know, the idea of Cape secession and stuff, like I said, is an idea that myself, Dylan, and Russell have generally spoken about quite positively in the past. I mean, we personally do support the idea of a independent Cape. Not so much just merely of the fact that it would be better, but almost as if it's an inevitability, as almost as if it's unavoidable, as if it's our, you know, like you said in the video, we have to go it alone. You know, it's our last sort of stand as a province, or as a place for our family to grow up in. But I think why don't you just tell us what exactly the Cape Independence Advocacy Group is about, when they were started, just sort of a brief sort of run through. I read your manifesto today, which is quite nice, but if you can just sort of run through what the basics of the manifesto actually are.
Sure. Okay. So look, we're a fairly new organization. We were formed earlier this year, and we launched about 7 or 8 weeks ago. We launched our website, although obviously there was a fair bit of work done before that. And essentially, we're a political lobby group. So clearly, we're pushing for Cape independence. We want to do that on the basis that the Western Cape doesn't have functional, genuine democracy, in so much as the people of the Western Cape aren't getting the government that they're voting for. They're getting the government that they reject. And you know, and we can't actually hold the national government to account. So therefore, that's something that doesn't really work very well for us. And the political lobby group for that really is you know, there are a number of groups pushing for independence, and each fulfilling an important role. Our primary focus is to get to the influencers, you know, the key people that can influence the outcome of this, and to apply pressure so that we can actually move Cape independence meaningfully forward. You know, we've got a number of areas that we focus on. Actually, there are 4. Our first one is that we focus on trying to increase the visibility of the symbols of independence. Look, that's something we're working on, but you probably haven't seen much of the stuff we've got planned for that yet. The second one is that we try to increase media coverage around independence, and you should have seen quite a lot of that from us already. The third one is probably the most important, which is to influence the positions of the major political parties on Cape independence. And the fourth one is to support other groups that are pushing for independence. They're our 4 primary functions. But you know, effectively, we want to get Cape independence done. We want to make this thing a reality, and we want to do it fairly quickly. So that's our mission.
Yeah, look, myself and Russell have been to quite a few of the Cape Party meetings and so on. They are quite. I mean, look, I think they were started in 2007. Jack Miller started the Cape Party, and I can't speak for Russell, but I've pretty much voted for the Cape Party locally since they basically were founded. So I support them. But what I have noticed in a lot of these meetings that we went to and these get-togethers is that wow, I don't know how to say this nicely. I don't know if you've ever been to one of those meetings, Phil, but let's just say there's a lot of colorful people that show up there, if that makes any sense. So like it just looks more, it resembles more to me like a braai, and but there's no meat or anything, and oaks are just talking cuck around the fire, if that makes any sense to you. Like that's basically what it looks to me. Okay, and it annoyed me, so I never went to one ever again, because I like action and I like people to do things rather than sit around a braai fire and talk cuck. So what I've found and what I've noticed with you guys is that you have more sort of concrete ideas of how we can sort of bring this out into the public sphere and outside of, because the Cape Party, I love them. Their manifesto is great. I love the work that they do. I will always support them. Okay, but it seems to me like they just never, like these groups, these advocacy groups, like the Cape Party, the Cape Exit, the ULA, all of these groups, they never seem to move past Facebook. They just like, hey, I'm going to start a Facebook group, and then you see it's Cape Party Animal Rights Group, then it's Cape Party Hats Group, and then it's like Cape Party Favorite Shoes Group, and Cape Party this group, and Cape Party that group, and stuff, and that just annoyed me. Okay, so I need to know, and this is going to be the deciding factor of whether you be able to actually convince Oaks. I want to know what is the actual mechanism, the logistics of getting this referendum put forward to the people that it needs to be put forward to, and so on. So how are we going to now go about, what are the mechanics behind getting that done?
Sure. Okay. Look, a lot of things there. So and some good points. So
sorry, Paul. I don't mean to like drop you in on the deep end right in the beginning, yeah, but it makes for good viewing. So
no, let's go for the deep end. Sink or swim. Good ideas either stand up or they don't. There's no point in hiding behind them. So and interesting. Look, we have a lot of contact with the Cape Party. Ideologically, we are very aligned. But I get it. When I can tell you exactly how my first conversation, when I first decided to get involved in the independence movement, my first conversation was with the Cape Party, and I spoke to their organizer, and she said, "Look, would you be willing to mobilize people in your hometown, which is Wellington, for the Cape Party?" And I said something that probably was extraordinarily arrogant, but at times I do have a streak of arrogance in me, and that's as long as it's misplaced, I don't mind. And I said, listen, you know what? If I'm going to give up a few years of my life for a cause, I'm not interested in mobilizing 10,000 people in Wellington. Either we get 1 million people behind this and we make it happen, or we all go home. And that's how I felt when I first started, and that's what's behind our movement, and that's how I feel now. I'm not in to take part or to come second in this. Actually, you guys have got young families. I have a Lart Lamaki and a Larter Lamaki, so I've got a young family. I've got plenty of things to do with my time, and this takes up a hell of a lot of it. So which is great. I'm in it, but I'm in it to win it. We didn't come for a show. We came to make our lives better. So kind of that's the background to you. So all these organisations are great. They all have a really important role. The Cape Party have a critical role in this whole thing, but like you, I'm interested in action. I'm interested in strategy, what we can do, how we make it work, how we get this over the line, and we're on a 2-year plan. At the end of the day, we expect to have a referendum within the next 2 years, and be in a situation where we're staring down the barrel of independence. How do we make it happen is a question, and it's an interesting question. And obviously, I don't have all the answers to that. I can tell you exactly what our plan is, and I can tell you what the sort of potential kinks in the road are. how other people react to those kinks in the road are what will determine what happens. So let's just take it a step at a time. There's all sorts of talk of legal processes and this and political this and legal that and the first and foremost thing that absolutely is a prerequisite for independence is the will of the majority. Either the majority of people in the Western Cape want independence, in which case we have a really good shout of making it happen, and then we're obviously going to have to go through the appropriate hoops. Or the majority of people in the Western Cape don't want independence, and in which case it doesn't matter how many hoops we jump through, it isn't going to happen. So but the first and foremost thing is for us to have discussions around independence, to inform people about what the pros and cons are for independence, and once we've done that, to try and build a majority of people in the Western Cape, 50% plus one, so that there's 3.1 million registered voters in the Western Cape. Half of that is 1.55 million. Add one, that means that one side has got 1.55001, and the other one is then 1,499,999 voters. So we've got a straight majority of people who want independence, and if we can get to that point, we're in the game. We're now at the table, and we press on. Where we are, I can't tell you on that. There hasn't been a lot of polling done on this. The Cape Party did some polling in 2019. Polling is exceptionally expensive, but we are about to do some polling now, and we'll get a good starting point of where we are for that. But there's going to be work to done. At the end of the day, you'll know yourself if you start talking to people about Cape Independence. Some people just have that complete blank look on your face that, well, what the hell is Cape Independence? How on earth does that work? And until this has been discussed in the media and our major political parties are talking about it, and it's on the TV, and everybody understands what it is, then we're not going to build a majority around that. So that's our first step in the process. Once we're in a situation where we've either got a majority or we're close to a majority, because these things build up over time. If you look at independence movements elsewhere in the world, you'll see that in election cycle support, in a run up to a referendum, support typically doubles. So if our polling shows that we're at 25% of people now, we're in a really good shout of getting to 50% within 4 or 5 years. We want to be quicker than that, and I suspect we're way above 25%. So that, putting aside that, first of all, that prerequisite, we must have majority support, and without majority support, this thing's dead in the water. Assuming we have that, then the next step in the process would be a political negotiation. Only one person can call for a referendum for independence in the Western Cape, and that's the Premier of the Western Cape. So at this point in time, that is Alan Winde, the DA Premier of the Western Cape, and he can call for the referendum, but it would then need to be granted by national government. So clearly there are a number of challenges there. First of all, you have to convince the DA that they want to call a referendum, and secondly, even if the DA call a referendum, you have to convince the ANC to grant a referendum. So and there we really get into the realms of politics. So once we get past that 50% plus one, whilst there are loads of really important legal precedents and legal rights that kind of set the parameters of that, it becomes a political negotiation and pressure to bear. So my instinct here is that once we've got the 50% plus one, we're almost going to have to jump to the third step, which would be the threat of a unilateral declaration of independence. And I'll come to that now, and have that hanging over the discussions, which is, we'd like a referendum, but if we can't get a referendum, this is where we're going next, which would then bring the ANC to the negotiating table, and that a referendum may be the better of the options that are on the table. So we'd love to see a referendum in the Western Cape, and probably good examples of that recently. The one I like to talk about a lot is Scotland. That was a great example of where there was an independence movement that started to gain ground and to flourish, and then there was a discussion between the territory that wanted to secede and the government that was the parent state, and they agreed to voluntarily hold a referendum, and they agreed to be bound by the outcome. And that would be our kind of perfect situation. The DA asks for a referendum, the ANC say, great, we hold the referendum, and we all agreed to be bound by the outcome. And I think we understand in the South African context. I actually think that is a real possibility that we can make that happen. Obviously, I don't think it's going to be quite as friendly and cordial as it is in the UK. So if the ANC were to refuse to give a referendum, but we had sufficient support, we could demonstrate that actually the people wanted this, but actually their democratic will was being prevented by the ANC, who were just deliberately withholding their rights. Then we would have the right under international to declare ourselves independent, and if we did that, we then would be looking for and look, that becomes a real minefield. So first of all, there's an absolute right to secede. There's an absolute right to declare ourselves. Secede is the wrong word. There's a right to declare ourselves independent. There's a thing called the Kosovo Declaration that was made in 2010, but the International Court of Justice in The Hague declared that there's no prohibition under international law of a people declaring themselves independent. So we've got that option. But once you've done it, that isn't the end of the game. The key part there then is how do people respond? And actually the pivotal thing is, does the outside world recognize your independence? So you declare yourself independent, and does the US now start treating you as a separate country, or do they ignore the fact that you declared yourself independent? Does the UK recognize you as an independent country, or do they just ignore you? And so clearly there's an element of lining up international support. So when we get to that point of the game, we already understand that the UK and the US and Netherlands and Israel, they would be examples of countries that would be a really good starting point to get international support. And so therefore, if we're in a situation where we already have a plan made up for unilateral declaration of independence, and we already have international support in place, then let's stepping back to part two. The negotiation for a referendum becomes infinitely easier, because actually you're negotiating with a proverbial gun to the head of the other party, which is, listen, we'd like to do this democratically. We want to have a referendum. It's best for us all. But actually, if you deny us our right to a referendum, and if you won't allow us a democratic vote, then this is what's going to happen. And actually, everything's lined up in place. So all that's going to happen is you're going to step out of the process, and we're just going to do our own thing. So that's the kind of structure of that. Obviously, that's greatly condensed, and I apologise. There's an awful lot of detail there. But suffice to say that if we have the democratic will of the people, if 50% plus one of people in the Western Cape, then there is a process that we can follow to make it happen. And I would back us all of the way. It would be a difficult process. There are going to be challenges along the way. But if we get to that 50% plus one, I would be willing to stake my reputation publicly and say, if we can clearly get majority support, we will make independence happen.
Very interesting, Phil. Dylan, Russell, you guys want to ask something as well? Because I have one thing that I want to talk about, but you guys can go ahead.
Yeah, look, Phil, thanks so much for that. That was really informative, but I must thank you for that. It was really concise and detailed, and I really appreciate that. If I have to look at your strategy that you've laid out there, for me personally, the greatest obstacle is not the ANC, is not international, whatever. Ultimately, it is the will, or inspiring the will to do it amongst the people. That is where we are going to win the battle. It is not up to anybody else other than the people of the Western Cape. All right, that is the way I see it, and that is where the battle is going to be won or lost. Would you agree with me on that?
I would agree with you 100%. And I wish that a lot more people could understand that too, because that is absolutely the key, the most important thing. And we start rushing around talking about Section 235 of the Constitution and what are the ANC going to do and what are this. But you're absolutely right. It's what do the people of the Western Cape want is the critical thing here. And can we convince them that this is a good idea?
Yeah. So Phil, I just want to go to the comments section over here. Russell Lamberti just made a comment over here. He said, this is a very, very valid, interesting comment. He said, losing a referendum could set back Cape secession by many years, if not decades. Is aiming for one within 2 years potentially too soon? I think that's a brilliant question. Thanks for that, Russ.
Well, and I think, look, we absolutely don't want to be Scotland. We don't want to work for 10 years for a referendum and then lose it. So I think it's absolutely a fair point. And I think that's where polling comes in. That's so critical. At the end of the day, clearly we won't be formally calling for a referendum until we know we can win one. So that's a timing issue. But I absolutely believe that we can build that majority. We can get to that 50% plus one. But we look, absolutely. When we call for a referendum, it won't be a gamble. We will know. And in fact, in our mind, the circumstances that would trigger a call for the referendum would be 2 successive polls, 3 months apart, using international best standards that showed 50% plus one supported independence. So that is our private criteria. 2 polls that confirm we're already over the line, and at that point in time, we would be calling for a referendum.
Say that again, Phil. Sorry, 2 polls, 3 months apart.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's quite concise. I like that. Very, very, very detailed. Dylan, Mr. Patriarch, you frothing at the bit over there to get going. Go for it.
No, that's all right. I was just thinking, listening very intently while my internet cuts in and out. Sorry, guys. But no, that was kind of one of the questions I had. Was actually what Russell Lamberti brought up. So it sounds like the 2-year, the 2 years is more of a goal than a deadline, right? So if you have the support by then, great. If not, maybe play it out a little bit longer and then see as support gathers. Of course, you want to sort of make your move once you feel you're in a position to get the outcome you want. So I think that you answered my question, Phil. So that's good. And I think that's a great idea. So gauging public support and then not sort of jumping the gun and then, putting Cape secession on the back burner for the next 50 years. I think that's definitely the way to go. And also, one thing that I thought was interesting is your guys' approach compared to, because typically what you'll see is they'll say, oh, we need a party for this, we need a party for that. But your guys' method is mostly to influence the, for lack of a better term, the elite as they already exist. Instead of trying to sort of create your own from the ground up, sort of influencing the existing structures in order to get the goal that you want once you feel that you have the people behind what it is you want to do. So I think that's actually very smart, and I wish more people would try that approach instead. Seems a lot more productive.
Look, I don't know how many people play darts, but in terms of setting aside that the 50% plus one is the key criteria, on our political dartboard, the bullseye is the DA Premier, and most of the rest of the board is the DA, because and actually, if I say there's a deadline, the hard deadline is probably 2024, because until then, the DA have a 55% majority and sit in the Western Cape and can use that majority to call a referendum on independence. So actually, we're in a situation where we know all of the knowns. That isn't going to change until 2024. And they are constitutionally allowed to call for the referendum, and therefore we have, arguably we've got 4 years to build intense pressure on the DA. But as I say, our plan is really 2 years. We're about to go into this first set of polling, and clearly once we have the results back from the first set of polling and we've analysed that data, then there'll be an awful lot of crunching of numbers and sitting around a board. And at that point, we'll be able to say, okay, look, you know what? They always say, no plan survives contact with the enemy, and that'll be our first major battle. We'll look at those numbers and we'll say, right, okay, look, we've got this plan. Are we still on track? Are we ahead of track? Or actually, are we kind of now tracking behind? And we need to kind of put some more loops, feedback loops in this situation to build support. But I have to tell you, in where we've got to so far, we are so far ahead of our plan that it's kind of actually mind-blowing. I accept we've probably come to the market at the right time with lockdown, but I think we've also got a message that normal, rational, moderate people can buy behind. It's not version 1.0 that's for the slightly wacky thinkers and extremists. We're now into the second generation independence model, and it's the one that captures that center that's required. You can't get 50% plus one if you don't carry the center, and we've arrived with that message. And obviously we're always limited in what we can say in public, but I mean, if anybody could sit and see on a sheet of paper the people that have arrived at our door saying, look, we want to be a part of this, we want to make this happen, then it's a list of the great and the good and the politically connected. And I have to tell you, there are some serious figures who are really keen to make this happen. So don't misunderstand. It's so funny. I often laugh. You get on Twitter and people say, you know what? There's no support for this. Look at the Cape Party. They only got 9,500 votes. And obviously, it's very frustrating because a lot of our work is done under the cover of darkness, and we aren't at liberty to say who we're talking to and what they're saying. But some, if people really believe that, they are in for one almighty shock, and very, very quickly. This thing is coming. There are serious people behind it. There is incredible momentum, and our primary focus, the DA, not because we're selecting the DA over any other political party, but because the DA have got 55% of the vote. They have the mandate, and nobody else does. So therefore they have to be our target. So often people confuse that and say, you know what, I like independence, but why are you fixated on the DA? But obviously we're fixated on the DA because 30% of people in the Western Cape voted for the ANC or the EFF, and of the 70% that didn't, 55 of the 70 voted for the DA. So whatever your personal politics, you have to understand that if you want this to happen, it's going to happen by putting pressure onto the DA, and we have to get them on our side. And if we're going to declare ourselves independent, it needs to be the Western Cape government that declares itself independent. So they are critical in this, and again, I clearly can't mention names. But do not misunderstand the DA. There are very, very many people in senior positions in the DA and throughout the DA who support independence, and they are just waiting for the landscape, the political landscape, to be safe to come out. And once that dam wall breaks, and the first handful of people come out and say, I support independence, the world is going to look different. And I look, actually, he's not a supporter of independence, but there was a fantastic tweet which really was heartening and I liked, and that was Richard Poplack, the editor of the Daily Maverick, who does not support Cape Independence. But he tweeted last week, I don't know if you saw it, for those of you that are laughing at Cape Independence, it's happening right under your eyes. And when a major editor of a national newspaper who doesn't support it is saying, "Listen, guys, wake up! It's happening," and you don't even know it's happening. That's what. They're the people who've got their fingers on the pulse. They're the guys that understand what's happening, and the needle on this thing is moving, and it's moving quickly.
Yeah.
Hi, Paul.
Yeah, Russell, carry on.
I remember you wrote quite an interesting article which I read a few weeks ago about and I can't remember the details of the article, but I think it was you who wrote it about is the DA seceding by stealth or something like that. Can you just run through that again? I remember it. If you could just remind us again about that article that you wrote. I think it was you.
It was me, and the article was called "The DA's Silent March to Self-Determination." And if people want to look, it was published on a few newspapers. But if you want to see that, and you go to our website under the news section, you'll see blogs, so news, blog, and then you can just scroll down and you'll find that article reproduced there and the links to the papers that published it. And look, that was a very interesting article. So Alan Windey has never publicly declared his position on independence, to the best of my knowledge. And ironically, I've submitted an article for publication this week called Dear Premier Windey, How Must I Vote? And I am traditionally a DA voter, and the whole article is based around saying, look, you know what, I'm a DA voter, and I voted provincially for the DA at the last election. I didn't vote nationally, but at every other election I had. And therefore, and the whole article is around, look, you're kind of saying about independence, and you've got the likes of from Zelia van Dam who were saying, look, you know what, nobody supports this because look who's voted for the Cape Party, and if you want it, go and vote for the Cape Party. So this was kind of a direct challenge to Alan Windey that says, look, I'm a DA supporter, and I am an independent supporter. And actually, what is the situation here? Are you telling me as the DA that if I want Cape Independence, I must vote for somebody else? And these are the sort of things that are keen for us to try and draw them out and say, look, come on, at some point, you've got to put your hands on the table. But the article that you're talking about was an interesting one, because if you go and read the Cape Party, the DA's manifesto for the Western Cape called Fighting for You, actually, it almost reads like a Cape Independence handbook. So, in that, you had Alan Windey saying things like, if the national health insurance is implemented by the ANC, we are going to refuse to implement it in the Western Cape. And then it talks about policing powers, and it says we are going to do all we can to bring power, take power away from the national government and get power over policing in the local government. And it says exactly the same over transport. So the whole notion of that was that Alan Winde is obviously actively campaigning to try and get more power into the province. So he's moving towards the same route. We're all moving in the same direction here. And in that same article, we talked about Peter Maria, who's the coloured premier candidate for the Freedom Front, and he in SOPA this year. So you have the State of the Nation address, and then you've got the SOPA, which is the State of Province address, which is the following week. It's there. If you have never seen that, it's really worth Googling Peter Maria's speech in Parliament, because it was a stunning speech. And in that speech, he took Alan Winde on, and he basically said, "Look, you've made this amazing speech for all these things that you want to do, but actually you haven't got a power to do any of them because all of those require the national government to take action, and you don't have any policy." And he directly challenged Alan Winde. And in the article you're referring to, one of the questions we had was, did Peter Maria have Alan Winde on the political ropes, or actually did Alan Winde quite like where Peter Maria was, and was he effectively a stalking horse for what Alan Winde really wants? And that's one of the unknowns. I know what most of the leaders of the DA want. I don't actually know what Alan Winde's position is. I strongly suspect that he will be in favour of independence, given the things that he said. But at some point we're going to find out, and it'll be a very interesting call.
Yeah, Phil, I don't think you see, the thing is generally when people think that we're interviewing someone to talk about Cape independence, a lot of people are like, but the economic argument, but the borders, but this, and those for me are just people that are incredibly critical about it for no good reason and stuff. It's not a good argument. The economic argument is silly. I mean, that's just, a particular guy harped on the economic and the border argument, a particular, South African YouTuber who happens himself to be a career politician himself. We won't mention any names, Ronaldo, who's a massive skeptic of Cape independence and doesn't seem to think that it is possible and stuff because, he's maybe when if the Western Cape breaks away, maybe his salary will decrease by 20%. I don't know, but anyway, so there's an interesting question. I want to go to the comments section over here, Phil, because there's quite a few really, really interesting questions over here. And now this is also a question which is particularly with regards to the logistics of this whole thing. And I suppose you guys have funding and sponsors and that sort of thing. But I thought this was quite an interesting question because it's, again, with regards to the practicalities of this whole thing. Pierre Duplessis asked, who is going to pay for the referendum? Will the actual IEC run the referendum? Or how does it work? I mean, if you can just, do you know anything about the practicalities of this and how it would work?
So the honest answer is I don't know very much about the practicalities. Obviously, a referendum is called by either provincial government or national government, and there is a Referendums Act. So, and clearly it'll be with the IEC. So the referendum will be a government sponsored vote in line with the correct laws, and of course that'll be sponsored by whether it will be a provincial government or national government. I have no idea, but yes, it will be sponsored by the government.
And then another question over here, it's from Russell. He says, can the Western Cape Premier unilaterally call for a referendum without a vote in the provincial legislature? Very interesting question.
A very interesting question, and I don't know the answer. The Western Cape is the only province that's got its own constitution. In the constitution grants the premier the right to call a referendum. How and exactly that plays out, I really don't know. I suspect that he doesn't need to have a vote in the provincial legislature. But obviously, one of the key things, even if he did, the DA have got 55% of the vote, and clearly there are other parties that would also be in favour of independence as well as the DA. Look, I think obviously it'd be an interesting vote, because I don't think everybody in the DA will favour independence by any stretch of the imagination, but I think we'll get to a majority. So no, look, I wished I knew the answer. I don't. Perhaps I must go and look it up. I have read the Western Cape Constitution, so I have read the clause, but I'm not a lawyer, and and also I haven't read it for a while, so I'm not going to speculate further, other than to say I think he can call it without a vote, but it'd be a good question.
So Phil, I think what Russell pointed out earlier on, which is kind of your guys' manifesto as well, is it's very important, and you'd be surprised at how powerful the will of the people can actually be. And a lot of people say, oh, but Cape independence will never happen. Okay, so we must just sort of sit down and do nothing now. This is the whole lay down and die kind of mentality, which myself, Mr. Patriarch, and Sir Russell the Based, we talk about this often, about being men of honor and fighting for your family and doing these things. So I think the situation is generally, when people talk about Cape independence, and those people that deny it are generally looking at this in the sense of well, the way I see it is, why not at least try? Are we just going to give this up, or are we just going to give it a go? And that's I think generally, like you said, the average logical normal person would understand this, and they would say, okay, look, we can give this a go. If it doesn't work, then we'll come up with a plan B or something else. Okay, but we have to get it going. We have to get the grassroots movements going and stuff, and that's important, because people don't understand what a movement is. And a movement is essentially that. A movement is not about how things are going to work technically in Parliament, or how things are going to happen. A movement is getting the will of the people behind the idea of the movement. And that in my mind is the idea behind a movement. And I think what you guys are doing now is the perfect idea for it. So for example, the Cape Party, they were probably, if they carried on as the Cape Party and there were no other movements that happened because of it and stuff that sort of sprung out of the Cape Party would never win any election. I mean, let's face it. You need that grassroots movement in order to change it. Would you agree with me on that, Phil?
No, for sure. Look, absolutely for sure. So on so many points that you've said there. So first of all, one of the examples I often get, and you're quite right. So you have to decide. Look, I was trained as a salesperson. I did a lot of sales training myself, and one of the key skills that we had in selling was to determine when somebody came up with an objection, was it what they called an excuse, or was it an objection? Was it really a problem that they had? Listen, I'd love to have that car, but I want to have one in red. Will getting them the red car solve the issue, or was it just something they said to fob you off? And I think so when we're talking about Cape Independence, you have that same thing. You have people who raise genuine issues that need to be resolved, and that's fine, and nobody minds that. I think that's great. And then you have people who just don't want Cape independence, and therefore they list all sorts of questions and arguments and debates to try and draw you down some side alley away from the fundamental thing, or the fundamental question. And I'll come to the fundamental question now. But the best example for that I often give to people is, look, you know what? If you decide that you want to get divorced, you don't start off the conversation by saying who's going to get the sideboard listen, at the end of the day, I'm only going to get divorced if I can have the car. You start off by saying, look, you know what? This relationship just isn't working for me anymore. And therefore I'm going to change something, and afterwards we'll work out how to make that happen as painlessly as possible. And I think that's a great scenario for Cape Independence. We start off by saying, look, you know what, we don't want to be part of South Africa anymore. And if the majority of people also don't want to be part of South Africa anymore, then the next step is, okay, now we know what we want. How do we make this happen? We don't start off by getting sidelined into all of these little details. And So I think that's one of the things. So an awful lot of people start asking these questions in bad faith because the key question they can't answer, and it's a key question that will win us to independence, funny enough, and it's the key question that every journalist must answer, and the key question that every politician must answer, and that is, give a reason why the people of the Western Cape are better off remaining in a relationship with South Africa than going on their own. And I challenge anybody to come and make a reasoned argument why actually we'd be better off in a relationship with South Africa than our own. There isn't one. We're financially better off on our own. We are ideologically better off on our own. We're going to have clean government. The government's going to be accountable to us. We can start solving our issues in terms of poverty and unemployment. We can get people out of townships. What possible benefit is there for us to not have the government we elected, but have the government that we rejected, who are incompetent and corrupt? There is no reason for it. So what happens is anybody who's against independence doesn't want to have that debate, because how could you? How do you make an argument for that? I challenge anybody to make a reasoned argument that's going to withstand scrutiny of why Cape independence isn't a good idea and staying in a relationship with South Africa is a better idea. So those people don't want to have that debate. So they find every possible argument apart from that to try and sidetrack you into those issues. So they're the people that just don't want it. And then coming back to your for the people who just give up before they've tried, I think there's two types of that. They are without question the most frustrating set of people. And if you're listening here and you're one of those people, if anything stops us getting independence, it isn't going to be the ANC. It isn't going to be me. It isn't going to be the DA. It's going to be you. You are the people that are threatening independence.
100%.
So get behind this. And so I think you have to kind of get behind this thing. And I think one of the challenges that we have in South Africa, and it's unfortunate, is we have some really unique skills as a set of people. And one of the things is, I call it the frontier mentality, and that having come from the UK many years ago, which was a much more structured society, to come here, things are kind of much looser, and you can you can duck and dive, and the rules aren't quite as flexible as they would be in other places in the world. So what happens? But actually we don't have the safety nets either. So we're used to looking after ourselves. We're used to solving our own problems. The classic boere maak 'n plan. That is South African. So when there's a problem, we just fix it, and we don't necessarily look to the government, and we don't look to other people. We fix it for ourselves. So one of the problems is we've become so good at fixing problems that we kind of look at independence and kind of, you know what, we'll get by. Well, at the end of the day, it's fine. We'll solve this problem. We'll solve that problem. And so therefore, you don't get this sense of urgency because actually we're so good at solving each of these individual problems that we're never really backed into a corner that some other countries in the world would be in this situation. But at some point, we've got to stop and say, look, what do we want to do? Do we want to fight the government on affirmative action, and fight the government on BEE, and fight the government on corruption, and fight the government on national health insurance, and fight the government on the unions, and fight the government on expropriation without compensation, and fight the government, and fight the government, and fight the government? At some point, at what point do we say, look, you know what, it's pointless having 75 individual battles, most of which we lose, when actually we can just have one, which is the battle for independence. Let's have a battle of ideas. I'm not talking about a physical battle. I'm talking now about a battle for ideas. Let's get independence. Let's get power for ourselves, democratic political power to the people of the Cape, so that actually we don't have to keep fighting all of these fires with a government that is just incompetent and has terrible policies, and it has no intention of taking any responsibility for any of the problems it causes. Let's just fix that one problem, the medical thing. Let's not deal with the symptoms. Let's get to the heart of the cause and fix it. And whilst boere maak 'n plan is fantastic, this isn't the time for a boere maak 'n plan. This is a time to solve this problem once and for all, so we can build a first world nation on the tip of the South African continent that we can all be proud of, and that actually all of us can prosper and have a better life, that our children can be here. And instead of reading in the papers every week of a family that left, and a family that left, and a family that left, we can start reading about all the people, the family that came back, and a family that came back, and a family that came back. and actually people, as it used to be, and I'm certainly not harking back to apartheid. Apartheid for me was mortally offensive. But I'm talking about a time when people wanted to come to South Africa because it was a land of opportunity, perhaps not for all, but for some. People came here because it gave them a chance of a better life. And that can happen now, and that can happen for all races. That can happen for every. We can create a Western Cape that people want to be here in, and actually then we can be like other countries in the world, and we can pick. We don't have to have people streaming over our borders uncontrolled. We actually can have an immigration system where we pick the skilled people that want to come here, the people that are going to bring and build our country. And, that would just be a phenomenal situation, and we can do that. But actually, we actually have to try. You can't sit on your backside and say it's never going to happen and it's never going to happen and laugh at these people. Just go back to that Richard Poplack tweet. For those of you that are laughing at Cape Independence, it's happening right before your eyes. That's where we are.
Yeah, Phil, what I like about that is that it reminds me very much of one of Nigel Farage's old speeches in the European Parliament, where he said, "We just want an amicable divorce." And that's pretty much exactly what you guys are campaigning for. And it's quite interesting that you have the British accent to boot. So that kind of makes it brilliant. But yeah, I support you 100%. There's a lot of great comments in the section over here. Joe van Bloemenstein says, absolutely, it starts with us, men who reject passivity, accept responsibility, lead courageously, and expect greater rewards. Men of action. That's right. So I think that is I mean, I didn't think of coming on or having you on the show to like I said, to discuss silly points like the economic model and stuff. But I think the idea is that we need to get the movement moving and get people out there educated on these topics like you were talking about. A lot of people that talk about Cape secession, I mean, myself, I've been a supporter of it, and I've never really heard it put quite like you put it, Phil. I think you are busy producing a bit of a Goldilocks phenomenon in the Western Cape, and I think you're onto something over here, and I support it a lot. Mr. Patriarch, did you want to add something with that? Taxation is theft. Hopefully, in the free Western Cape, we will have lower tax. Hopefully.
Yeah, I won't hope for no taxes, but lower taxes maybe. But just from my to help put my coiffure in order, I had to move to the living room here, so my do doesn't look as good. Anyways, yeah. So I was just wondering. This is a question I had. So first off, amazing. I'm loving what I'm hearing here, and I think dickering about the small points of like, oh well, what exactly we need this type of government and we need this sorts of reforms and whatnot. All that stuff is secondary to the goal of independence, and I think that's one of the things that I really like about what you're advocating for. It's like no, let's put all that aside. We can deal with that later. Right now, we need to put all of our force and energy into independence. And it's sort of the same thing that you saw with like successful secession movements are like that. They're one track, right? They have the message, like with the UK, get Brexit done, or in the United States, whatever it is, make America great again. It's very simple, right? It's a very clear message, something that is easy to communicate, and something that most people, I think, in the Western Cape can get behind. My own experience, I have in-laws. All my in-laws are South African, and I've talked to them a number of times on occasion, and they're receptive to this idea of Cape independence. I think it's something you're going to get a lot of support here in the Western Cape for. And not only that, but as more and more people, it starts becoming a topic of conversation and gets in their minds and starts getting disseminated amongst the public, you're going to see more potential would-be passive support for it increase, like you were saying. So as this thing starts rolling, more of the marginal people who aren't necessarily against it, but they haven't really thought about it that much, I think it's going to gain a lot of steam. One question I had, and I was talking to Scott about this a bit earlier before this program, but it seems to me that Cape secession is a thing that's only really ever talked about in the Cape specifically. Why do you think there's not so much of an emphasis for, like free state secession, for example, or other provinces sort of going their own way? Why do you think it is that the Cape is specifically keen on independence, whereas these other provinces aren't? Is it for? I'd just like to get your ideas on that.
Well, look, so look, the biggest split, and actually one of the things I probably differ with some of the groups in the independence movement is actually that they kind of have got drawn into this cultural argument that somehow there's this big cultural difference between the Western Cape and.
Oh gosh, we just lost Phil. Let's try and get him back on. Hang on a sec. Sorry about that.
I was listening with rapt attention too.
Sorry, that was just about to get really good. There he's back. There we go.
Real juicy.
Hi guys.
Sorry, man.
That's all right. I don't know what happened there, so that's fine. So I'm not sure where we got to. But yeah, so I think we were talking about the cultural argument. So, but actually, the biggest difference between the Western Cape and the rest of South Africa is ideological. So apart from anything else, the Western Cape effectively votes for a capitalist free market. That, if we want to sum it up in one or two words, and 67% of Cape voters vote for what I'm going to call capitalist parties. And for the rest of South Africa, when you take the Western Cape out, 73% of the rest of South Africa votes broadly for socialist parties. And I'm calling the ANC a socialist party, accepting that there are capitalists in there, but not the capitalists as we know it. Kind of crooks. We've got this huge ideological divide between the two territories. And that ultimately is what decides us, and we can see it. And the great thing of that is we don't have to debate. That's not up for debate. We've got 26 years of election results that show that. Even when the ANC had one term in power in the Western Cape, but even then they only had 44% of the vote. At no point since 1994 have the ANC had a majority in the Western Cape. They averaged 35% of the vote. The last decade, they've averaged 31% of the vote, and they've currently got 28.6% of the vote. So the people of the Western Cape do not want to be governed by the ANC, and they do not want the ANC's policies. So that's the biggest divide. When you go to the rest of South Africa, look, I don't want to hark on about the ANC. I think we've all got our views on the ANC. What I can say for the ANC is they are the genuine democratically elected government of the rest of South Africa. So if you go to the Free State, whatever we may or may not think, the people of the Free State elected the ANC. They didn't steal the election; it wasn't rigged. The people of the Free State wanted the ANC, so they've got the government they want. So what are they going to secede from? You can say, well, why on earth would the people of the Western Cape who've been robbed blind, with the Freedom Project and all of the other stuff there, and why on earth would they carry on with the ANC? But that's their choice. Unfortunately, that's how democracy works. That's what the majority want there, and that's the case. So what are they running away from? They've got the government they voted for. It's us that's got the government we didn't vote for. We're in a situation where the government we voted for we didn't get, and the government we tried our damnedest to reject we got anyway, despite the fact they only got 28% of the vote. And we live in a province where the party with 55% of the vote that we elected can't carry out its policies, and the one that we specifically rejected gets to tell the one with its 28% of the vote, gets to tell the one with 55% of the vote what it must do. So we actually are in a terrible situation that we have to think. So in terms of the rest of South Africa, they're just not in that situation. The only other territory that they talk about seceding would be obviously whether the Zulus at some point would want self-determination, and obviously there's an awful lot of history around that. But I mean, and I never really get involved in that. I don't really understand the history of the Zulus. I've never looked into it because it's not our fight, and that's not my nature. We're here and I think you've seen on the interviews I've done. I live in the Western Cape. I'm here to fight for Cape independence. For my family and for my people, and by my people I'm talking about my compatriots in the Western Cape, regardless of their race, religion, or culture. My fellow citizens. We voted collectively for the DA, and that's how democracy works. And we all accept that. So collectively, as a people, that 6 million of us, 3.1 million of us got a vote. we selected the DA, and therefore they are our government, whoever we individually voted for. So, you know, obviously, once you start going into KZN and whatever the Zulus may want, I know there's a story there. I know a lot of people try and link their independence with our independence, but I'm not really interested in those stories. I'm here to fight our battle, and they must fight their battles.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. So something interesting, an interesting comment that that just came up from the Pet Zoo film crew, who also made earlier a comment about how my camera is set up and stuff. I used to be a photographer, Pet Zoo film crew, so that's why it's set up perfectly like this. So just saying. But anyway, he says, or she, I don't know, says multicultural Singapore uplifted the economies of its neighbor countries as they followed it, or they follow its example, like Botswana and Rwanda are doing currently. Tani Zilla's dream, why not? So that's an interesting comment, which essentially all the movements and stuff here in the Western Cape could sort of, you know, trickle off onto the other provinces and you know, influence them and so on. It could. I mean, I'm not saying it will, but there's a big probability that it possibly could. Just
look, Cape Independence will be in the best interests of South Africa. I have absolutely no doubt. I also have absolutely no doubt that we won't be able to make that argument, you know, because you know, we've seen how it's going. The ANC and actually the South African electorate have no sense of that they caused this. And you know, either whether they're the politicians that did it or they're the people that elected the politicians that did it and kept on electing them, you know, they have created this situation in South Africa. And unfortunately, you know, the ANC way is to make a fault policy wise, and when you get a terrible outcome, to double down and just do more of the policy because you obviously didn't do enough of it in the first place. Yeah, and we've seen this circle. So South Africa obviously is heading on a steep downward trajectory. They're not listening to sound advice. They're not listening to economists. They're not listening to the IMF. You know, they are not listening to the rating agencies. They are hell bent on scapegoating anybody that they can. But there will come a point in time where they hit rock bottom, like Zimbabwe did. Yeah, and if you look at Zimbabwe, you know, they had a humanitarian crisis. But imagine how much worse that humanitarian crisis would have been if South Africa wasn't next door, you know, to be able to for them to lean upon. You know, and I don't see it as our role to hold South Africa up. But the reality is that's what's probably going to happen if we get an independent Cape and we become a first world country and we're prosperous, and you know, and that they finally hit rock bottom. You know, they're going to lean on us, and you know, and we're all. And the bottom line is, we're all going to have friends and family on the other side of the border. So to a certain extent, you know, without allowing ourselves to be abused, we are going to help them. And actually, it may well be that an independent Cape it helps seed the rebirth of South Africa, and you know, helps it get back on its feet once sort of socialism has reached its inevitable end result, and then there's a rebuilding process. So, you know, I think there is some benefits to South Africa, but I'm not going to pretend that I'm doing this for South Africa's benefit. I'm not. Yeah, I'm doing this for the people of the Western Cape. We can't save people who aren't interested in saving themselves, which is where South Africa's at. We can save people who do want to save themselves, which I really hope is where the Western Cape's at.
And that's you know, that's essentially the crux, isn't it? I mean, it's, you know, we are all men over here, so hey, you if you're in a terrible situation and stuff, the only person that's going to be able to help you get out of that terrible situation is the person staring back in the mirror. So I suggest to those skeptics that are listening, yeah, try not to be so limp-wristed and weak. Stand up and do something. Okay, that's how it is. Tell me, Phil, what I've always wanted to know and understand about these sort of things, and I know this is a question that often comes up, but I want to know. So, let's say, for example, I want to. I'm not saying that I do, but maybe I do. I do want to get involved in helping you guys out, like you know, physically on the ground, campaigning, whatever it is that needs to be done. How do you go about doing it, and what is the actual you know, is there like a day-to-day kind of thing? How does it work? Help me out here. Help me become a member and a contributor to the Cape Independence Advocacy Group. So,
okay, all right. So our answer is probably frustrating because we're not really a grassroots organization. So obviously you can become a member of the Cape Party, you can become a member of Cape Exit, you can become a member of the ULA. You can't actually become a member of the Cape Independence Advocacy Group because we're a political lobby group. But you can support us. So how can you do that? You can go to our Facebook page and you can like the Facebook page and just keep updated on there. And so that will be a simple thing. You can keep a track on our campaigns, and that's really critical for us. So we're about to do our, I said at the start that we haven't started on our visibility campaigns yet, but we've been busy working on our first one, which is going to be Cape Independence car mirror socks. And we really want to start having people driving around the Cape with the Cape flag, which is a really visible symbol for people that, hang on a second, as you said, we're past Facebook, we've moved into the next we've moved into the next phase, and now here it is, people can see it, and when you start seeing other people are supporting it, it helps other people to feel free that they now can express themselves. So it's the first ground roots of that movement. So probably in mid-August, we were hoping for the 1st of August, but I think it's probably looking unlikely now. But certainly by mid-August, we'll have those out there and available for sale on our website, and you know, that's definitely something you can do. Then obviously in terms of fundraising, clearly funds are critical. Polling for us is a huge thing. It's about R250,000 to run one poll. We need to run a poll every 3 months. So you know, clearly anything that people can help us with, fantastic. Again, go to the website. We've got SnapScan on there. We are developing other payment methods. So if you can support us for that, then fantastic. And then equally critical, perhaps even more critical than money, is just influence. We are peddlers of influence first and foremost. So perhaps you know somebody in the DA that we can talk to. Perhaps you know somebody who's a famous rugby star. Perhaps you know somebody who's a famous cricketer. Perhaps you know somebody who is a well-known businessman. That introduce us to those people. Yeah, we're interested in peddling influence. When we first set down our strategy, it kind of said the DA, the provincial council of the DA. There's 11 characters on there. And then we said, look, 50 influential people. You know, you could imagine, and look, none of them have. So I hope I'm not embarrassing them. Yeah, but you could imagine if Sia Khaleesi or even Etzebeth came out and started supporting Cape Independence. Yeah, you could imagine if Helen Zill or Alan Windy came out and supported independence. You know, you can look at some of these characters and say, if these people got behind this, and we can get those characters, they are complete game changers, because where you can struggle for 6 months to get 10,000 Facebook supporters, you know, someone like Helen Ziller's got 1.4 million supporters already. You know, if she comes out and speaks with this, so they're the things. Just help us to make the introductions and to help us. And then likewise, just become an ambassador in your friend. Talk about your friends. You know, it's like anything. People have to feel free to come out on this issue, you know, because people have been made to think that Cape Independence is some stupid issue. And if you believe in Cape Independence, you're some fool. But you're not some fool. You're not. Actually, you're taking responsibility for yourself. This can happen. And, you know, every I can't remember the quote, but there's a famous quote that says every great idea starts off with somebody looking like a fool, and ultimately, you know, it turns into that. This is a winning ticket, and we're at the pivot point. It's much easier now to come out. If you got involved in this 10 years ago, you would have been laughed off the face of the planet. But thank heavens for the likes of the Cape Party and Jack Miller and Adrian Kay, who did get this and they did start that space, you know, because we owe them a debt, because they have opened up this space for us that the rest of the movements have moved into. But now it's becoming safer and safer and safer. But talk to your colleagues at work, you know, talk to your friends, talk at the pub, talk around the braai, talk Cape Independence. And they're the things more than anything else that gets there, because once we start talking about Cape Independence, then we're going to start, Cape Independence is going to start happening.
Absolutely. That's pretty much, again, another very, 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 very important point, you know, that guys like Jack Miller and stuff since 2007 have probably been, you know, the amount of ridiculing that they've had to put up with, and Oaks calling them him an idiot. I mean, he's probably been called an idiot left, right, and center, but you know, he stood fast, and you've got to give him that credit. It can't be easy to do that for 13 years and still be pushing it, which is impressive. I think we've gone over an hour. Russell, and Dylan, do you have anything that you want to add?
Oh, go ahead, Russell.
Yeah, look, my biggest thing about the whole Cape Independence movement, and like Dylan said earlier, you got to narrow it down. Forget about all the peripheral things. You got to narrow it down into a slogan and drill it into people. So my idea is this, first of all, when people say, oh, but the ANC will never allow the Western Cape to leave. Well, my answer to that simply is it's not up to the ANC. Okay. Ultimately, it comes down to the collective will of the residents of the Western Cape. Simple, doesn't matter of anything else. It doesn't actually matter. If we can get that into people's minds, all right, just that narrow focus, all right, you can actually, then we've got a winning, a strong shot at this whole thing, because our motto should generally be something. We got to come up with some slogans, So it should be something like either the ANC can give the Western Cape their independence, or we West Capers will just go and take it for ourselves. Something along those lines. You know what I mean? It's got to be
it again, or what?
It's what?
He said, "Make the Cape great again."
something like I say. I mean, that's the other thing where slogans and those sorts of things are become very narrow focused. You want to narrow it down, just like all the great movements and dare I say it, revolutions have done. They narrow things down into an incredibly narrow focus, and they just drill that thing home over and over and over. Slogans, captions, sound bites, all this sort of thing. And strange, that's if we can get that into people's minds and it on the table and in the public space, you do have a good shot at this.
Thank you. Fantastic. Again, I agree with you 100%.
Dylan, do you have anything to say before we close up?
Oh man, I just gotta say, thank you very much. This has been really enjoyable. I can't believe it's been over an hour already. The time just went by. And yeah, I guess the benefit of things like the Cape Party is, and other organizations that sort of came before, is they sort of laid the seeds. So you get this vanguard of people who hear these ideas and oh yeah, this is really cool. And people like yourself, Phil, who take this notion of Cape independence, and then now that there's sort of the topsoil's been put down and the seeds have been planted, now you're here to sort of start add in some water, fertilizer, and then hopefully collect the harvest as time goes on. So no, I'm all for everybody who's involved in Cape independence. I'm all for it, and we should be working together. And I think this is something I'm very excited about. I would very much like to see. And it sounds to me, Phil, like you have an excellent strategy laid out. And I wish you all the best. And I can't wait to see where this goes.
Thank you very much. Looking at actually, as you were chatting here, I reminded of a statistic that I worked out during the week, which is a really exciting statistic. 15% of the Cape electorate has already signed either a petition or joined as a membership of a Cape independence movement, one of the movements, whether it's Cape Exit, whether it's the ULA, whether it's the Cape Party, whether it's our website. 15%, and that isn't 50% people that follow it. That is 15% that physically have done something. They've gone and put their ID number into a petition, or they've gone and they've joined a party. So that tells you just at what point we've got to. 15% of people have actively physically done something at this point in time, this early point in time. It tells me that when we do that polling, that number is going to be significant, and people mustn't underestimate what's happening behind the scenes. At the end of the day, they perhaps haven't seen that spill over into their personal and political lives yet, but it's about to.
Yeah, Dylan, we have a request over here. Don't you want to bring out Mr. Jordan Peterson to tell people to clean their rooms? Clean your bloody room.
Oh, I don't know about that. But Chris Becker asking for Jordan Peterson impression. Okay. Well, maybe I'll do that when we sign off. I'll think of something JP would say.
Okay. Anyway, so Phil, I'm going to put the website or the web address for your website in the comments section or in the description, and the Cape Independence Advocacy Group Facebook page. Definitely go and check out their website. It's a really nice website. I must compliment you guys on that, Phil. It's really professional, very classy. It's the greatest. It's the greatest website. It's like probably definitely the best.
Tremendous. Everyone agrees. Believe me.
Well, look, there are two people that built that website, and look, they aren't people who, through their professional lives, are able to publicly think. But they built that website and maintain that website for free for us. And look, at the end of the day, I guess they're watching and look at a huge thank you. You're a huge part of what we've done, and it makes a big difference. So that's the first the shop window of all that we're trying to do. So thank you to those people. They know who they are.
That's also a great thing, Phil, is that, if anyone's out there and you're watching this and, you want to help Phil with, making posters or whatever it is, and you think that you can help them, contact them, reach out to them. I mean, I got hold of Phil through their Facebook page, and immediately he replied back and very open and receptive and stuff. So send these oaks out, contact them, send them emails, send Phil an email and stuff. I'll put his email address as well in the comments or in the description of the video and stuff. But definitely go and check these guys out. I think they really are onto something over here. Hang on, are we getting Mr. Jordan Peterson in here? Let's see. Clean your bloody room.
Oh yeah, I think there he is. He's right over there. Jordan, do you want something to say? Oh, thank you very much. Yes, the South African government is controlled by radical ideologues, and it is our duty to clean our room and push for Cape secession. It's very important now. You must get Cape secession, okay? That's all I have to say.
Why, thank you, Mr. Jordan Peterson. Thank you for making an appearance on here. We paid a lot of money to get Jordan Peterson on the show tonight. So
much money.
Yeah, so much. Millions. More than what any polls cost or anything, Phil. That's how sponsored we are. We're the main kunena over here. Anyway, thank you so much for all of our listeners. I wish I could have got to all the comments in the comment section, but it was quite busy. Everyone's, good comments and stuff, good questions. Again, thank you so much, Phil, for coming on. For our listeners as well, remember, like the video, give us a subscribe. We put out at least 2 or 3 videos every week. So go and check us out. Give us a subscribe, those of you that are new to the channel and so on. Thank you so much for listening, folks. Remember to stay reactionary out there, because
God wills it.
God wills it.